Aw, yeah, we're fading back in, which means... Actually, I apologize for saying, aw, yeah, I'll never do that again. But it's part number 2 of the signing day special. SB Nation, of course, you see the logo behind us. More importantly, Bud Elliott to my right and to your left. SB Nation Recruiting, the editor, the man in charge. We've gotten through the South, we've gotten through the Midwest, we've gotten through the East Coast, the Atlantic Coast Conference, but there are 2 very, very important conferences left to cover, the Pac-12 and the Big 12, because West Coast people have hearts too, and West Coast people care about 4 and 5 stars as well, Bud. No matter what you may think.
Y'all are caring people.
We're good folks. Here's what you need to know. It's been a very active day along the West Coast, but also along the South, in the Midwest, and along the East Coast. So since we last spoke, there have been a number of revelations, of commitments, and ongoing storylines. What has stood out to you these past couple hours?
Well, we knew Steve Sarkisian could really recruit. And in his first year at USC, he is a little bit limited by scholarship still. I believe that's the final year of that. But today he closed extremely well.
Yep.
Pops Damian Mama, grabs Adoree Jackson, and also John Juju Smith, all 5 stars. It's the class we thought they could have, and it's the class they ended up with. It's a
the class
great job.
they should have.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
USC. It's the premier college football program on the West Coast.
You know, USC sort of recruits itself because it really has had a lot of success in the formative years of these recruits. You got to remember, these guys were born in what, 1996? You know, or around that time. So, you know, it's an interesting deal out on the West Coast. USC has grabbed most of the headlines out there. I actually thought John Juju Smith could go to Oregon.
Yeah, the word was he was prepared to go to Oregon as late as yesterday or the day before.
And I guess just late work by USC or a change of mind or whatever he had there. I guess that's what it was. And then on the East Coast we have Lorenzo Carter selecting Georgia, 5-star defensive end. Really not a surprise to anybody. I think everybody pretty much figured he was going to go to Georgia. Florida made a push, LSU made a push, Florida State made a push, but in the end, distance matters a lot to a kid. It is very family-oriented.
Right.
Mark Richt established a great relationship with his family, and it's also a position of need for Georgia, a good pass rusher. So with all that combined, you got to figure he was going to go to Georgia, and he did. And then I guess the other story is that Michigan State still not listing Malik McDowell.
Yeah.
6'7", 290. 17 years old, which means he cannot sign his letter of intent, I believe.
Needs that signature from a parent.
And Spartans fans are not happy about this one at all.
Yeah.
As we know, his mom does not want him to go to Michigan State. She feels that there are too many influences there. She came out and clarified that she does not have anything against Michigan State.
Right.
She just doesn't want him to go there because and his dad said it's because he has too many people there who are non-athletes who could have a bad influence on him, and they think he needs to go somewhere else.
Which is fair enough. It's a refrain we do hear at a lot of places. Parents want kids to go away, sort of experience new people, new identities, whatever it is. That sounded weird, as if somebody has a new identity. But in any case, yes, an ongoing storyline. Michigan State released their list of commitments and signees, and he was not on them. So something to pay attention to. Every year there's 1, 2, or 3 or something like that.
And for people who don't know, he has committed to Michigan State, but the schools, per NCAA rule, cannot release the kid's name until the letter of intent has been signed and certified by the compliance office. So you can't sign a letter of intent without a parent's signature, and so he's not in yet. So he did commit today. It did happen. He's not in because the parents are not on board with it yet.
Correct. So no real surprises today. We've seen a ton happen over the course of the day, but Rashaan Evans to Alabama, that appears to be the real big shocker, all things considered, with his background and his family and his geography. But things are going pretty much according to plan, as a lot of us thought they would. So we're going to turn our attention to the West Coast, as Bud just mentioned. We were looking at USC and how they were able to close, how Steve Sarkisian was able to close so strongly. Adoree Jackson, somebody who was looking not just at USC, but a number of big-time programs across the South. Juju Smith, down to a number of huge programs nationally. And then Damian Mama, the other 5-star that you made reference to. I'd long thought to be going to USC, finalizes that decision. So in this class that USC is focusing on, offensive line, just speed all around. They appear to be doing, they're headlined by these top kids, but it seems like they've done a good job as they get closer and closer to moving away from those sanctions, building depth in places they've needed depth. We've seen the offensive line be less than adequate these past couple years at times, and I think the depth at offensive line is what impresses most about this class.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. We've seen in the past where USC could not protect the passer and could not consistently get a push up front in the run game, and back to the Pete Carroll, they could consistently do that. Matt Leinart was pretty much always protected, and they could always open big-time holes for Reggie Bush and Lendell White.
Yep.
Now that they get 3 guys who I think are guards, but I think out of the group with Vianney and then Toa and then Damian, I think one of those guys could probably end up playing tackle.
Sure.
Maybe Damian if he slims down a little bit. He's currently 370. That's maybe kind of a kindergartner too big.
It's amazing where you have to say, maybe if he gets down to 340.
Right, exactly.
Down to 340, yeah. Okay.
And even if he does, I think he could make an early impact as a guard. Stamina may be an issue there at 370, but certainly a really talented player. And you're right, games are won at the quarterback position with special playmakers and then guys who put their hands in the dirt.
Right.
And USC is really doing a nice job there, making a difference up front.
Yeah, absolutely, addressing those needs. And then Juju Smith steps in, Marquise Lee, of course, and USC has been thin. A couple of guys they've had have been injured. Nelson Aguilar is the clear #1 next season, but obviously he should be able to come in and affect games, if not right away. He's not on this list, obviously, because Adoree and Juju both just committed, but certainly have to be considered among or just at the top of that list.
But in fact, having them not on this list is maybe even a better thing for us because we do have guys, like a Chris Brown, like a Bryce Dixon, and really talented players that are signing up to play for USC. If we knew Sarkisian could recruit.
Yes.
Is he going to be able to turn this team into some more wins? How is his coaching going to be? I will say the challenge this year and going forward for Sarkisian is, and I wrote about this, is a lot tougher than it was when Pete Carroll was there.
Yeah.
UCLA did not have its act together like it does now. Oregon is really cranking. Stanford is recruiting at a whole nother level.
Obviously.
The 2 Arizona schools are doing really well as well, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody here.
Right.
But
even Chris Peterson closing.
Yes, exactly.
In the way
he did
he's
a great
done,
job locking down the state of Washington at the end. It's going to be a challenge, and it's Pac-12 recruiting battles are a lot more fun now than they used to be.
Yes, absolutely. So we saw the list of 5, then you add in the guys that have committed since then. Who stands the best chance, given how they are made up right now, depth-wise, and the style of play they play? And, Adoree Jackson, everybody wants him. Is he physically on the same level as, say, like a Jabril Peppers or a Tony Brown or Marlon Humphrey?
I would say that Jabril Peppers has a lot more strength than Adoree and a lot more length. But Adoree is probably more agile and perhaps a little bit quicker. And I love Adoree because he competes every rep. He really doesn't quit. He's got great swagger. And when you look at corners, and I just use swagger, so yeah.
Sure, no, it'll happen.
Some cornerbacks have that, and it's that confidence that, hey, you might have beaten me just now, but I've already forgotten about it, and I'm going to go beat you on this rep and shut you down. He's also a real difference maker in a return game. You like to see those young guys in the return game who can flip the field, make special things happen, on special teams, and I think Adoree is probably the pick there. All
right, fair enough. Now Adoree most likely joins the defensive backfield with a ton of talent. We saw Sua Cravens go last year,
Leon McQuay,
and then McQuay. Yeah, so that is a backfield. As soon as they are able to build even more depth, you figure out who's going to be the nickel and so forth. It's going to be a scary thing, especially in a Pac-12 conference that likes to move the ball quickly. You need a deep defensive backfield to get those numbers there.
You got to have that versatility, and you have to have the ability to have guys that can stay on the field, play multiple roles, multiple positions.
And another school that has, I think, impressed you a lot with what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball, UCLA. Right across town. UCLA has loaded up not just in the defensive backfield, but a couple of really good linebacker recruits in Zach Whitley and Kenny Young. Along the defensive line, they've added a ton of talent. And then speed-wise on defense, adding Jaleel Wadood, adding a Darius Pickett, as you see on this list right here. They're getting more and more talented, and one of, if not the best defensive backfield recruiting classes last year for UCLA and what they did at the safety and corner positions. Who stands out to you now?
Jim Moore is really building something at UCLA. It's not just, hey, they've got a nice class. They've put together a couple nice classes here in a row. They're not going away. Just because Sarkisian may have USC moving in the right direction, that challenge is a lot tougher now. I mean, you look at Pickett, who's a really nice corner with some solid agility there. Obviously, they pulled Kenny Young today, which is a very good hire, or not hire, excuse me, but a very good commitment for them. Active linebacker, but also has good size. I mean, he's not just a guy that runs around. He's 220, could probably play at 240, 235-ish, but a guy I think that can stay on the field for all 3 downs, and that's important, like we just talked about. This is a class, it doesn't have a whole lot of 5-star type players, but when you look up and down the list, there's a ton of really good depth here. And you go up and down, I'm like, I like that guy too, and I like him, and wow, I remember seeing him. He's good. Yes.
All right, so UCLA, so who sees the field early on? Who's at that point physically? Who gets the game? Whose game slows down for them the most when you look at the list of UCLA commits that could come in? They lose a couple big key linebackers in Zumwalt and Anthony Barr to the NFL. They're on offense. It's an up and down year. They're probably not going to be able to count on Miles Jack to play 15 snaps on offense a game. So it's Adrian Clem, who I know you like a lot.
Yeah,
his ability to recruit the
on
offensive line. And recruiting and developing kids. So who are the names that pop out immediately for 2014?
Like you mentioned, they have guys that they're missing at linebacker now. I would say Kenny Young or Zach Whitley. One of those two guys has got to be able to step up, and if not start, at least give them some quality snaps. I mean, football is not a contact sport; it's a collision sport. You have to have quality depth. It looks like UCLA is finally building that now, on defense. Yeah,
no, absolutely, and. Long-term projects with UCLA, any names that I'm not going to put you on the spot too much, but with UCLA's class.
I'm trying to remember all who they got now.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting class. They didn't really, at the quarterback position, it wasn't a huge need this year. They went after Brad Kyle late, the Miami quarterback commitment. But are you happy with this class? Is this something that you feel like sets them up for years to come?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they were in on Adoria, I guess, technically, but it wasn't really somebody that I thought they had a real good shot to sign.
Right.
I feel like they did a very nice job getting most of the kids they should have been able to get. I'll give you a name here, though.
Sure.
Dwight Williams is an undersized linebacker, Adoree Jackson's teammate, but I think a guy that really plays all over the field. He needs some time in the weight room to put on some size. 205, you really can't play linebacker in a Pac-12. It's a very physical league, despite what some people think. You give that guy a year, maybe 2 years to develop, he could be something really good if he's able to add on some good muscle.
All right, Stanford's class this year, of course, they have Solomon Thomas commit to them today over a number of big national schools. Not the same number of heavy hitters as we've seen perhaps in years past, a couple of years ago with the offensive line class with Andrus Peet and who else? Kyle Murphy, and then the kid from Washington, the guard.
Garrett.
Yes,
Josh Garrett.
with Josh Garrett. So not that kind of year where there's the heft at the top, but how do you evaluate what Stanford's been able to do this year? And then they have a big name quarterback. They get the big name defensive end today. What have they done between?
It's not so heavily concentrated on just one position, like you mentioned, but they have done a nice job of filling most of their needs. I mean, they get Solomon Thomas, who's a really nice pass rusher, out of Texas. They keep Keller Christ home in the Bay Area.
Large quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a really well-built, 6'4", probably 230, 225. He's a big kid with a big arm, a very Stanford-style quarterback, very prototypical pocket passer type. They do go get some offensive linemen. They get Riley Gibbons. They flip him from Miami. They get Casey Tucker out of Arizona, who I think are two guys. I don't think are going to play early, but they have good athleticism.
And that's a good thing. If you're in a position where you don't need top kids to play early, there are very few schools that can offer that.
Yeah, if you're especially on the offensive line. The saying goes that the closer you are to the ball, the tougher it is to play early.
Yes.
So quarterbacks,
makes sense.
Linemen, because you have to have a certain physical maturity or just experience in the system with quarterback. Corners and receivers are able to play a lot because a lot of it's just how fast are you and your agility and stuff like that. So they did a nice job with that. I like Christian McCaffrey a lot. I think he offers some versatility maybe they haven't had in terms of guys you can both run and catch. You can use him some in the slot. You can use him out of the backfield as well. I like him. They signed Dalton Schultz, who is one of the best tight ends in the country.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he's the best, but I really like the Penn State kid.
And last year was the first year in a long time where we didn't see dominance from the tight end position with Stanford. They had those years where they had three guys at all times that could kill you. Last year, there was some injury concerns, but it was a down year for Stanford at the tight end position. I
think the most important thing Stanford did, and this will be a little bit underrated because some of these kids are a little bit down in terms of their rankings. They added athleticism in the back seven.
Yes.
They get a Joey Alfieri. Brandon Simmons is a very athletic kid out of Texas at safety. Elijah Holder can definitely play. Terrence Alexander is a really nice get. They beat out Notre Dame, and I believe Ole Miss as well today. For us. That's what they've needed because we see them win some games, and in other games, they just can't cover people. You have to be able to man up sometimes, play good man coverage, or play some sort of varieties of coverage with some better athleticism in the back seven. And I think they're able to do that now.
Stanford's also an interesting situation because they do recruit nationally, and they kind of have to recruit nationally because their standards for getting into the school are so much different and higher than a number of schools they're recruiting against. And the area that they've actually succeeded really well, it's not a surprise, but the South. The Georgia pipeline, they've recruited all over. They've recruited in Virginia. I think that's where the quarterback is from. Why am I blanking on the quarterback for Stanford's name?
Oh, Keller
Bright
Christ?
Lights. No, their current quarterback.
And I'm blanking on it too.
Yeah, it happens. We watched a lot of Stanford this year. In any case, yes, they're recruiting everywhere. Do you see the turnover on the staff? Because we're seeing Derek Mason move to Vanderbilt. We saw their offensive coordinator leave. Do you see the turnover perhaps affecting how Stanford's been able to recruit nationally, just because it's Kevin Hogan, by the way. what they've been able to do on the recruiting trail.
You know, we didn't see it as much this time because I think a lot of these kids have been recruited by Stanford the full time.
Right.
And a lot of times Stanford will start recruiting you early, but they say, you know, we don't really have admission for you yet. You have to continue your good academic progress to show that you can handle the rigors of Stanford. And so these kids are pretty locked into Stanford. A lot of times, once Stanford clears them, like I know when Terrence got cleared, he was very excited about being cleared to get admission into Stanford.
It's hard to turn down Stanford.
Right,
If you're good enough to play there now, because there is a high level now expected, and you're good enough in the classroom to get into Stanford, it's real difficult for me to imagine.
Arkansas thought they had
no.
Solomon Thomas. I mean, they thought his visit went great, and the feedback they were getting.
Of the South,
and
University
Stanford
of Arkansas.
Exactly. You slipped it in on me. That was good. That was really good.
Yeah.
I think that it is important because you have to find the right fit for Stanford. Not every kid can handle the academic rigors, and not every kid can handle the environment there. I mean,
it's very different.
It's a special kid that needs to go to or a special type of kid that needs to go to Stanford. I think they're doing a good job, but staff turnover is always a question. I mean, Derek Mason was a very good recruiter and a very good coach for them. And you know, will the new staff be able to replicate that? I think that's a question for next year for sure.
And to sort of splinter off of that, Derek Mason at Vanderbilt, I know that's obviously in a conference that you are closer to physically.
Yeah.
Do you expect him to be able to not replicate, because everybody points the academics at Stanford, academics at Vanderbilt, still two very different situations, because Vanderbilt in their own backyard has to compete with so many heavyweights. But are you bullish on him? Do you feel like he's going to do a good job continuing what James Franklin was able to do in attracting talent to Nashville?
I'm bullish on him as a coach.
Yes.
But I think I am very bearish on his situation.
Yeah.
If you look at what James Franklin did, he won, 18 games in the last 2 years, I think 2 9-win seasons, which is kind of unheard of at Vanderbilt back-to-back. Florida had crazy injuries this year. Georgia did too. Vanderbilt beat them both. You had Tennessee that was going through some real turmoil.
Yep.
They were very down. Kentucky was pretty much an automatic win for Vanderbilt over the last couple of years. Now Mark Stoops has them on the rise. Tennessee's on the rise. Florida and Georgia are probably not going to have that level of injuries again.
Right.
And I think the West keeps getting tougher and tougher. Their cross-divisional opponent is actually Ole Miss every year. Ole Miss keeps getting better. It's going to be very difficult. Even if he were to recruit a little bit better than what James Franklin did, I still think their win total will be less by a game or two per year, because it's just the rest of the league is getting better at a rate quicker than what Vanderbilt is.
Right, sort of like what's happening in the Pac-12, which with USC's situation, it's a lot harder to just win. That the talent level is so much higher. There's so much more money in the conference that people are spending to make themselves more attractive. So it's a fair point. And then the team I think everybody's been waiting to talk about in the Pac-12, my Oregon Ducks. The Oregon Ducks with a really impressive class, just more high-level recruits than ever before, perhaps. You know, it might be colored by the fact that they missed out on a few at the sort of last second with John Juju Smith committing to USC, and then Trey L committing to LSU. But they get Matrell McGraw out of I believe Louisiana. He's from New Orleans.
Yeah, that's good.
And so they fill a need there. They're losing a couple safeties this year. When you think about Oregon's class, how is it defined this year? Do you like the talent level that they're bringing in? Do you feel like it's a downgrade from what they've had, an upgrade from what they have, or they're just on the same plane?
Yeah, I think it's probably an upgrade. Oregon's really loaded this year on the field, obviously.
Yes.
So you do have some kids that you don't have to press into action immediately. They can really take their time and develop at the right pace. And then you have some guys who may be able to come in and make an earlier impact. I mean, you get some difference makers in the secondary. You address both offensive and defensive line some.
Yep.
You get some immediate help at guard, which we know was a need this year.
Yep.
Obviously, with Losey out of the junior college, the big dude there. You get Royce Freeman, who is an interesting back for Oregon, because Oregon has traditionally gone, or not traditionally, but at least recently, gone with smaller backs.
Yes.
And Freeman is a bigger, more stout type of back. He's not as talented as Jonathan Stewart, because Stewart was a total freak, but he's a very different type of back, and I think somebody who could provide Oregon some much-needed tough interior running as well.
Yes.
It's a very balanced class. Like, I don't really know that there's a need that Oregon didn't hit on. Maybe another difference maker.
Oregon
receiver.
fans will tell you defensive tackle.
Okay, well,
that's been because they lose a couple.
It's tough to get out there, though.
Right,
I mean, west of the
very
Rockies,
tough.
That's such a commodity out there. It's just not available. I mean, how many elite defensive tackles?
It's true.
Grow up west of the Rockies? Hardly any.
It's absolutely true. And year in and year out, you hear that refrain from Oregon fans, like we're making these inroads in the South, but it's for 4-3 guys.
Right.
It's for Takoi Sumler. It's for guys that are this
guys who are
Charles
attracted
Nelson
to playing
and
in
Tony
space.
James. Right. But they're not attracting, and part of the reason it seems, and what we've heard somewhat, is these guys don't want to play in a fast system. They're big.
That's probably a good point, actually. Yeah.
And they don't want to practice, they don't want to just, not that they don't want to practice, but they don't want to practice at that pace, where it's not a big guy friendly program. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's some of what you hear.
I would buy that some. Some other pace schools are able to get, defensive tackles, but I think geography has a lot to do with it.
But they're closer, yes.
Right. Like Auburn runs a really fast pace, but they're able to get big.
They're dealing with a much bigger pool of guys to find guys that are willing to play in that pace.
Right. Like elite defensive tackles fit in every single system. Like there's no defense that says, we don't want elite defensive tackle.
With great guys that are giant and fast.
The guy who's 320 and can move like that. Nah,
right. Nobody's turning them away.
Now, there's no program that's like necessarily that much more attractive to those guys. I don't think like Oregon is really attractive to these elite playmakers who like to get the ball in space and are able to, quickly get upfield and run and score touchdowns. And Stanford has carved out a really nice deal for itself with these multiple offensive line sets and playing power football.
Yep.
But I don't know that you can do that defensively. I don't know if there's any place you can go and say, we are all about defensive linemen.
Right.
Because everybody's going to make that pitch.
Yep.
There are not enough humans that are that big and that athletic on earth.
That's absolutely true. So who stands out if we look at the Oregon's class one more time, or at least the top of the class? Who stands out as the guys immediately with Oregon's situation? You mentioned they're loaded on the field, particularly at quarterback with Marcus Mariota coming back, and Morgan Mahalit comes in. Not a guy with a ton of starting experience in high school, but appears to have a lot of potential. And Royce Freeman, you mentioned at the running back position, offers a new wrinkle. They have a couple of running backs back in Byron Marshall and Thomas Tyner, but they're not big guys. So are those the guys? Obviously not Mahalik, but is it Royce Freeman that you expect to have the biggest immediate impact?
I think Freeman could, depending on how the inside run game works out for Oregon. But I also think shoring up that offensive line, particularly on the interior, being able to run inside zone and outside zone. And I think you do that potentially with your four-star guard you signed out of junior college, Losi.
Yeah.
Or Lucy, if I'm saying that correct.
Right.
A big-sized guy, about 300 pounds, 6'4", 6'5", that's what you want in the interior. To me, when I was watching Oregon this year, it seemed like they did not get great movement with their guards at times. And that's somebody, if you sign a junior college player, you don't sign him because he's a developmental player. You only have him for 2 years, so he better come in and go now. And I think Arian Springs, I know that Oregon is really loaded in the secondary, but he's a very good player as well. A kid I really like, a top 5-6 corner in the country, I think.
Out of the state of Texas. All right, right now we are going to go to a Pac-12 expert, if there ever were one, Avi Kunath from Pacific Takes. Big day in the Pac-12, all sorts of 5-stars and 4-stars signing everywhere. Teams are appearing to be more talented than ever before in terms of what they've been able to do on the recruiting trail. Avi, can you hear me? How is your day going?
It's going pretty well. How's your day going?
It's going pretty well. I can't complain. I wish there were just more dramatic stories other than a couple of kids whose parents aren't signing letters of intent, but not so bad. What to you is the headline of the Pac-12 signing day?
That's got to be USC. They pretty much got every player they wanted and probably needed to get in this class. Steve Sarkisian had to come in with about 2 months of preparation and try and secure a lot of these guys. And this is why USC hired Stark, because he's really good at knowing all the players down in Los Angeles. He has really good recruiting connections with everyone. And they got Adderey Jackson, they got Juju Smith, and I think it's just a really solid class for the Trojans today to get all the guys that they needed to get.
All right, and when you look around the conference, who are the names that strike you as the best of the best in terms of signees within the Pac-12? Who will this class be best remembered by when you look not just at the 5-stars, but there are guys that can impact teams because of depth issues or attrition? Who are the names to you that, and we have some early impact names in front of us, but to you, who are those guys that are not 2015, 2016 guys, but 2014 names?
It's tough to say because this year was not a particularly strong one for the Pac-12 in terms of recruiting. We have a lot of good classes, but compared to previous seasons, it's a little bit of a drop in terms of overall talent. This is more of a depth class for a lot of guys. Like UCLA got a lot of talented guys, but they are so stacked in so many positions that I'm not sure how many will actually contribute. USC, I think if you have to look for impact guys, you'd have to look back again at the Trojans because they do have those depth issues. It's the last year of the scholarship restrictions. This is the last year that they have to deal with not having enough players to put in certain positions. So I think you'll see guys like Jackson and Smith and maybe Bryce Dixon get a chance to play early and play often because they don't have enough guys to suit up.
One of the more interesting stories in the Pac-12, both just administratively and when you talk about football, but also with recruiting, is Chris Peterson and the job that he was tasked with and that he's done since taking over at Washington. You know, a lot of the stories today have revolved around USC, UCLA, and Oregon and the major national names that they've been in on. But Washington and Chris Peterson have quietly closed on a number of top kids. Were you surprised at all by his ability to come in right away and be relevant when he was at Boise State, a very good team, but not necessarily a huge name on the recruiting trail?
I'm not terribly surprised because Peterson really knows how to recruit Los Angeles and he knows how to recruit California. So he was able to find a lot of guys in those regions. I mean, he's really good at scouting all over the West Coast because he has to bring in guys that kind of fall under the radar.
Right.
And he has those connections built in. So he was able to land a bunch of guys that, I mean, they're really going to help him. Caleb McGarry, the offensive guard, was just probably the second best recruit in Washington. He got Butta Baker to flip from Oregon.
Yep.
And you got KJ Carter-Samuels. So they even got another quarterback where the Huskies are pretty stacked in terms of depth. So I think Peterson is just a really underrated recruiter, and I think it's starting to show dividends. And he has a shiny new stadium in Seattle too.
Yes, he does. A couple of schools that actually run a very similar system have a couple of, we'll call them charismatic coaches. Mike Leach and Sonny Dykes, certainly not on the level of the royalty of the Pac-12 in terms of the talent that they were able to bring in, but also doing a good job recruiting to their system, figuring out the fits for the Cougars and the Bears respectively. Are there diamonds in the rough? Are there big wins for them on the recruiting trail? Who were the winners in the classes for Washington State and Cal, if any?
I would say that in terms of Washington State, I mean, they just know how to recruit wide receivers. They have a bunch of guys that are coming in. Zaire Andre is one really talented prospect who had offers and interest from a bunch of Pac-12 schools.
Yep.
They had a lot of, I would say, they were able to attract a lot of interest from a number of different players. Like Leach recruits Florida. He goes all over the place to find players that you never hear of, and they turn out to be diamonds all over the place.
Right.
So I think Leach is really good at finding those wide receivers. In terms of Cal, it was a pretty decent class. I would say that they were able to find the running backs they didn't have last year. They got Trey Watson from Centennial, and they got Vic and Wary from Texas. They have a power back and a scat back, so they have two guys who can go outside and inside, and that'll give them a little bit more depth in that place. And they got Eric Brown, who they managed to flip from Washington, too. They have another solid wide receiver to go with. Pretty much the only strength of their team, which is the receiving core.
All right, and I think one of the more interesting stories, other than Washington and how they were able to close and Chris Peterson evaluating talent later on in the process, is the fact that Rich Rod and Arizona State, I wanted to forget Todd Graham's name, but I just couldn't. Rich Rod and Todd Graham actually doing year over year just a better and better and better job of bringing in talented kids that the recruiting services and the analysts like a lot, to not just come in and eventually be good, but you're talking about more and more early impact guys at positions all over the field. What struck me, interestingly enough, about Arizona is they're doing well on defense. How would you evaluate the job that Rich Rod is doing in addressing needs and finding guys who can contribute sooner rather than later, especially with the turnover that Arizona is now dealing with?
Oh, Arizona brought in a very strong class. They needed a lot of the guys that they got this year, and I think they were able to appeal to the fact that a lot of these guys that would get immediate playing time because that is not they had a very inconsistent defense last year, and they needed to upgrade in a hurry. And I think they got a lot of guys that could impact early. They got Marquise Ware from Salish, and they got Jamadre Cobb. They got both of those guys, both outside linebackers who are perfect for the 3-3-5. And they had Marcus Griffin, who flipped from Washington State earlier today. They got Rodney Carr, an athlete who could play safety and wide receiver.
Yep.
They have a lot of talented defenders because Arizona, I mean, they have the offense to compete with anyone, but that defense sort of gives it away a couple of times.
Yeah, and Arizona State with a class of their own that really addresses a number of the same things that Arizona was able to address with their class, and finding guys on defense, of course, with how successful they've been these past couple of years. Will Sutton, Carl Bradford, Junior Onieli, a lot of talent has come out of Tempe, and they're bringing in some more this year. Is Todd Graham building something to consistently compete for the Pac-12 South, especially as USC and UCLA are getting to the levels that they should always be?
Yeah, it's a transition year for Arizona State. I think they lose a lot of their defenders, and they managed to address most of their needs this year. They got Connor Humphreys, a strong defensive end, and Tashawn Smallwood to kind of fill in that Will Sutton role.
Right.
And they managed to get DJ Calhoun from El Cerrito, who is probably going to be one of the top pass rushers in the Pac-12 in the upcoming years. I think he's just one of those guys you should look at and consider him as a instant impact player because they need that kind of defensive influx. I would say the Sun Devils have got a lot of good guys in that are going to contribute in a way that will help their offense sort of get to a better place than it was. Like the ASU offense was good last year at home, but kind of had their inconsistent moments against better teams. So I think Arizona State's in a good position to compete year after year, and they did sign probably their best class since Todd Graham's got there.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there reason for hope with what Colorado has been able to bring in? Do you see this team's talent level improving? Utah has been a team that has been pretty good, but I'd like to focus, if you can, on Colorado's class. It appears that they're getting a little bit better in terms of the quality of kid they're bringing in. Is there reason for optimism with the latest influx of talent?
I'd say so. I mean, Colorado did manage to get Sheffield, who was committed to USC, and is going to try and he's pretty much like a Paul Richardson clone.
Right.
He's a little bit smaller, but he's speedy. So he's kind of that dynamic playmaker who can come in and be a number one receiver pretty quickly. In terms of depth, I mean, they got a lot. They got some JUCO guys. Cal had the same strategy. They had to fill in with some JUCOs, but they also managed to recruit Colorado pretty well, and they got some guys from around, but I don't know if they have like a lot of talented guys. I think it's going to be a long haul process where Mike Mack is still going to have to produce some results on the field. Colorado only won one game in the Pac-12 last year, so they have to sort of just keep on building up slowly. I mean, he showed some signs against some of the good teams last year, but I mean, they have to continue that upward tick.
Fair enough. And so if you had to give me, and this will be my final question, I'll let you go enjoy the rest of your Pac-12 signing day. If you had to pick one player because of circumstance who will get the sorts of reps needed to do so, who is your Pac-12 freshman of the year in 2014? True freshman of the year.
True freshman. Well, gotta think here
on
about
the
that
spot.
one.
So you got some talent coming into Oregon on the offensive side of the ball that's been impressive. You have obviously a cornerback and a wide receiver and Adoree Jackson and Juju Smith on both sides of the field for USC. UCLA gets some playmakers. Who stands out to you as the breakout freshman star of 2014?
I'd have to say Jackson for USC just because I think the Trojans are losing one or two guys in the secondary this offseason, and they have to plug him in pretty quickly. And I think he's the kind of playmaker who the Trojans kind of need. They need someone who will kind of plug up in the back. And I think him along with Cravens, they're going to be really talented next year. That secondary is going to try and take it back up to the way it used to be. And I like all those guys in the Trojans to contribute early.
Perfect. Avi Kunath from Pacific Takes, the destination for all things Pac-12 on the interwebs, but it happens to be on SB Nation. It happens to be on SB Nation. Avi, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your signing day.
Thank you. You too.
Perfect. So there's Avi running through the Pac-12, and I think you might not see completely eye to eye in terms of your evaluation of the talent level coming in. He sort of saw it as more of a depth year, but you like the sort of height of talent coming into the conference.
You know, I can agree with Avi in that I think that there have been other years with more overall talent, and I think next year certainly has more talent out west.
Interesting. Okay.
But I think that the lack of talent sort of highlighted just how intense the competition was. For
Yes.
When you don't have an exceptional year talent-wise out west, you see teams having to go and try and recruit more nationally, and then you see teams really, really fighting for these talented prospects because not
Right.
everybody is going to get kids. I mean, people are going to lose jobs over this because they're not going to win enough ball games because there are so many good coaching staffs in that conference now, and they're all fighting to get these kids, and you don't see teams signing 15, 18 four-star type prospects. It's tough in that league.
Who have you been impressed? We talked about Washington and Cal and Stanford. We talked about Stanford before, Avi, but we talked about Washington, the Arizona schools. You particularly were pretty impressed with what the Arizona schools were able to do this year on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time it was that both those schools were really well coached.
Right.
Whether or
That's
not,
true.
whatever we think about Todd Graham, I think we can all agree he's a pretty good coach.
Yeah.
And so is Rich Rod.
Won the Pac-12 South in his second year, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those two are battling just every single day on recruits. Everybody was pretty interested to see what Peterson would do once he got to a program with real resources.
Yes.
And, all respect to Boise and stuff, but that's not,
No.
on, let's be real. I thought he did a great job at Washington. As a fan of a team in the Pac-12 North, what do you think when you see that he's been able to do that in just 6 weeks? I mean, just lock down Washington. That's a pretty big deal, I think.
If a coach at Washington can lock down the state, there's enough talent there that you have Oregon and Stanford in unique situations with the sort of flashiness that Oregon presents that no other school in the country can match in terms of their relationship with Nike. And then Stanford, which no other football power in the country can match really in terms of their academics.
Exactly.
So it's a unique situation, but the thing that would scare me most is the fact that Chris Peterson's a really good coach now getting talent. And Steve Sarkisian was always able to get talent, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, but for some reason he won 7-8 games a year. Chris Peterson was winning games, granted against lesser competition, but also with talent that he had to really, really scout himself, and the staff had to do themselves. Whereas now he is going to, I feel like with his ability to coach, his coaching acumen, attract higher and higher level kids. And even if that's just in the Northwest, even if it's just in the state of Washington, look at the kids that Washington has lost out on recently from the state.
Exactly.
Taylor Mays, the guard we just mentioned, Josh Garrett to Stanford. There are kids going everywhere. Even looking back, Michigan, I feel like they had I'm forgetting the offensive lineman's name. But you understand what I'm saying. But like the level of talent in Washington is not insignificant. So Washington immediately becomes a more dangerous team on the count of having one of the probably 5 best college football coaches in the country.
Oregon has pretty much run this conference for the last couple of years, with Stanford kind of as the 1B to the 1A.
Sure.
But do you see that? Do you feel like it's going to be tougher to for one team to do that going forward, or do you think that maybe some team will emerge to do that, or do you think there's going to be more parity?
I think there's a lot of B+, A- in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And it's that much harder to be an A team, which actually it makes what Nick Saban and Les Miles have done in the SEC that much more impressive, because they've been dealing with something like that for a number of years. The only difference is they've had a number of teams in their division with a ton of turnover. Texas A&M just recently coming in. Ole Miss finally becoming a player in recruiting. And then, Mississippi State being up and down, Auburn being up and down. Right.
Winless in the SEC.
Right. And then you have Arkansas with everything they've dealt with, from being an SEC West contender to the depths that they've fallen. So they've been so up and down, whereas I think in the Pac-12 especially, and even looking towards like the 14 playoff, I think you're going to get a lot of 10-2 teams that are on the outside looking in, just because everybody's going to beat up on each other.
How many staffs can you legitimately argue are the best staff in the Pac-12?
It's tough. You can't with Oregon anymore, I don't think. I think there are question marks at a couple of coaching positions there.
Stanford, I don't know if we can anymore because obviously David Shaw's made some mistakes and they've lost a lot of guys. But I think there's still a lot of really good staffs there. And it's just,
who's the best? Is it UCLA's? They've got a lot of assistants that do really well on the recruiting trail. I'd like to see them win a division first.
Yeah, winning is
or I guess they won the South, but win the conference first before we can to dub them.
Some
the
people
best,
don't like Mazzoni as much as others.
Right.
I think everybody loves Clem on defense. They do a really nice job.
Long term, if Arizona's staff is able to stay together, I think that's dangerous as hell, because what can you attract? When you're in the Southwest, you can attract speed. Arizona's already looked into Texas. They've looked into Southern California. You can attract speed. Rich Rodriguez has that reputation. That's suddenly very scary. I think the most complete staff, it might still be Oregon, just in terms of the experience they have recruiting the West Coast and winning the conference. But it's by no means any sort of long shot. And what David Shaw's been able to do as a head coach certainly puts them right there too.
The Pac-12 is fun to follow this year. It's going to be a lot more fun next year because the battles are only going to be even more intense, and the talent level is going to be even higher. Because I think it's a nice year west of the Rockies, especially at the quarterback position. You're having multiple teams going after big-time blue chips.
Absolutely, and the quarterback position alone in the Pac-12 next year it should be fantastic with USC, UCLA, Oregon State, Stanford. I'm trying to think who isn't returning. Washington doesn't return Keith Price, and Arizona, I don't believe has B.J. Danker, but there's a lot of guys coming back. So that not only that, and in terms of recruiting, you have a lot of kids that want to play for experienced quarterbacks. So it's not a bad deal at all for the Pac-12. Looking forward. So pretty good. In Washington, as you mentioned, doing a good job locking down local talent and finishing strong. UCLA, USC, Oregon, Stanford appear to be the class of the conference at this point, but it's scary, scary prospect if you want your team to end up in the Final Four.
There's a lot of teams that I think could go, well, I guess they play 4 league games out there, but you could go, a lot of teams I think could go anywhere between 6-3 and 3-6.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of parity like that.
Absolutely. All right, and with that, we should probably move on to the Big 12, a conference itself in flux, just because you have a new coach at Texas, and that is, you look at the big names coming into the Big 12, and these are not insignificant names. Something you'll notice, though, a lot on offense, and not a different thing for the Big 12, a team, a region of the country that produces a ton of offensive skill players, but sometimes it can be hit and miss defensively. Baylor does a good job at the beginning of this season on defense. Oklahoma up and down, finishing strong defensively. But what to you is the story of the Big 12 as you look back upon today's signing day?
I would say that it's going to take Charlie Strong a little bit. I still have confidence that he will get to where he's going. Right. But we look at this list. Yeah. There are no Texas players. There are no players going to the University of Texas. Certainly some kids from Texas, but.
And a couple of the kids that are going to Texas are coming in at positions that aren't positions of need. Like, correct. We assume David Ash is probably going to start a quarterback, and Gerard Hurd is an extraordinarily intriguing prospect at quarterback.
Sure. They have some bodies at defensive tackle, so Peter Ford may not start.
Correct.
But yeah, Joe Mixon was a great pull for Oklahoma out of California. A kid that I kind of compared to, not in terms of talent, but in terms of style, to our Marshall Faulk. Right. A really, really bright guy who catches the football better than some receivers in this class. He's actually a taller guy than Falk, a longer strider, but I think you could actually line him up at receiver.
Yeah, this is true all-purpose.
Yeah, if you're a defense and he's in the backfield, you have to be conscious of who is going to be covering him if and when he motions out wide. And I would look for Oklahoma to get him involved early and often in the passing game there because he's a true difference maker. Katie Cannon, Baylor has another offensive weapon out at receiver.
How dare they?
That's going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially on Thursday nights. Davion Hall is another really, really talented player who could actually play receiver or safety for them, so could play defense. Sure. We have some semblance of defense in the Big 12.
It could happen.
I would say overall, though, the Big 12 is down.
Yeah.
I mean, this league is not setting itself up to be a competitive league top to bottom with the other national leagues. I mean, it's not recruiting anywhere close to what like the Pac-12 or the ACC is doing. And obviously nobody's close to the SEC, but in terms of talent being brought in, it's kind of Pac-12, ACC, and then Big Ten. But Big 12 is really lagging. I mean, West Virginia.
Surprising considering the central state in the conference and what that produces.
But I guess when you have so many other states out there that these teams are in that don't produce anything. Right. West Virginia does not produce talent. Kansas has nothing. Iowa has nothing. You have, 5 Texas schools in the Big 12 plus all these other schools trying to recruit Texas, plus LSU making great inroads to Houston, Texas A&M obviously doing a big-time job there.
Schools on the West Coast coming. You see UCLA, you see Oregon, you see Stanford coming in.
Both Arizona schools that we just talked about.
Absolutely.
Where's the talent going to come for the Big 12? We talk about the talent drain in the Big 10 sometimes, but it's really happening in the Big 12. I mean, you're having schools that are signing 10% 4 and 5 stars, 5, none at all.
Not okay.
It's not really. The difference makers are not coming to this conference this year.
Right, and the interesting thing is, West Virginia takes so many strides 2 years ago in winning the Orange Bowl in the impressive fashion. You would think they're going to start attracting, the top Florida kids that they've attracted in years past. You look at Noel Devine, you look at Ivan McCartney, top kids that a lot of schools want moving to West Virginia, and then they sort of take 7 steps back this past season in terms of what they're able to do. They're just not attracting kids to play in the Big 12. TCU, as soon as we thought they were going to be a major player, they take a step back and are just inconsistent. Kansas and Kansas State, Kansas State's never going to be, in the running for top kids. That's not how that program is built. But Kansas and Charlie Weiss, You can't. If you're not winning, you're not going to win recruiting battles. It is interesting to see, though, even still, with the level of talent available, that not enough of those top kids are staying home.
I think West Virginia and TCU have exposed something. The Big 12 is clearly a better league than what the old Mountain West was, or what the Big East was. We talked about this at dinner tonight. When you recruit and you play in a league like that, sometimes your backups are going to have to play.
Yes.
You're going to have to play well. And if your drop off from your starters to your backups is pretty significant, you're in trouble. And I think TCU has seen that depth really matters, and that you have to have your backups be able to make good plays. I think West Virginia has seen that too. They don't have enough playmakers or enough good playmaking depth and enough quality depth that could really start on other BCS programs for them to be successful in the league. Kansas State, I feel like, is always just kind of do their Kansas State thing. They do really well in JUCOs.
Right.
Kansas is not getting a whole lot better. Iowa State is not bringing in a bunch of elite talent. This is Texas Tech. We all love their coach, but not really making huge upgrades in talent. This is tough.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at Texas right now and what they were able to bring in later on in the process, especially given their transition with Charlie Strong coming in. A lot of talent, again, that Texas brought in, just not on the level that Texas has been able to recruit at these past few years, with Mac Brown sort of slowing down in the recruiting process the past couple of years. But he was able, for all things considered, they underperformed because they were a talented team these past few seasons. With when you look at that defense and what they're able to send to the NFL, Earl Thomas, Jackson Jeffcoat, guys like that. Who stands out this year as guys that could come in and improve Texas's opportunities?
I think Roberson has the explosiveness off the edge where he could do it. Now, granted, they have pretty good depth at defensive end. This is what we talked about a couple of minutes ago in terms of there aren't a whole lot of Texas early impact guys in this class. It's a class that's going to provide good depth, especially at some key positions, offensive line in particular. I know they would have liked to land another talented linebacker. Freeman's a very good one. Hurd is a really talented quarterback prospect.
Yes.
I mean, he is a...
And you had a chance to watch him on the circuit this year. What makes him stand out?
I think he runs the ball better than any quarterback in the country, and he throws the ball a lot better than you would expect him to for being the type of runner that he is, which is a guy who can juke you but will also run you over. And if you're willing to run your quarterback, which I think if you're going to sign Hurd, you have to be.
That's sort of where you are.
You can't make him into a pocket passer. It's a waste of his skills. That's a real advantage for Texas. I think Texas will get it going under Charlie Strong because he did it at Louisville. If you can do it at Louisville,
you can
do it in Austin.
Yep.
And I think what we just talked about, how there's kind of a lack of talent overall in the rest of these teams.
Yep.
Texas can do something about that.
Yes.
The rest of these teams, for the most part, cannot. They can't just make talent grow, and they're not all of a sudden going to become a lot more attractive, especially some of these places that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
So I think Texas can quickly get back to dominating most everybody in the league, kind of like it did in the mid-2000s under Mac Brown.
Okay, fair enough. And if you're going to talk Texas, then you're going to have to talk Oklahoma, just because you finished the season beating Alabama in the South in a dome, especially with Alabama having a 6'2", 240-pound juggernaut at running back, going like 8 for 108, and Oklahoma still wins. Oklahoma's class is another interesting class for Oklahoma because you see a lot of states after commas that are not OK or TX in this list of 5.
You really do. Arizona was a very good year this year in terms of the state.
Yes.
And we see them dipping in there with Mark Andrews, a really, really excellent tall receiver. Joe Mixon, we already talked about how he's a fantastic running back. Justin Hansen, I think, is kind of a developmental QB, but down the line, he could definitely do something. Dallas Todd adding good receiver depth. Stephen Parker is a guy they beat out A&M and Auburn for down the stretch. It kind of feels to me like Oklahoma is reinvigorated a little bit.
Yeah.
They did a nice job in California today, and they really it kind of feel like they were almost lifeless the last couple of years.
Right.
And then this year, you thought, okay, whatever. And then they beat Oklahoma State there at the end of the year, and they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. And now this program has some real momentum again.
Great. Is there names that stand out to you as being ready for college football? And granted, this is the Big 12.
Sure.
This is not playing in the Pac-12, ACC, SEC, at least as of note, or the top of the ACC at least. Oklahoma has recruited well. They've always recruited well, and they've recruited well, as you mentioned, in states not Texas, not Oklahoma.
Right.
If a coach is at a place long enough and builds a staff that stays around long enough, you start building connections farther and farther away from your state. Who stands out to you on this team and these 5 guys as like they're good enough to compete now?
I think Natrell Curtis, who is a big guard they grabbed out of Phoenix, is maybe a little heavy, but if he comes in and works himself into shape, he clearly has the power to play right away in that league, or at least provide them some good depth. Joe Mixon is clearly somebody who's ready.
They lose 2, maybe 3 running backs. They lose Damian Williams, they lose
Right.
Roy Finch, and they lose Brendan Clay.
And
so there's availability there.
An excellent job by Oklahoma today in California, which you've seen them do in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're a little bit less Texas-y now and a little more California. They do a great job.
Yep.
Southern Los Angeles, the Fresno area,
Yep.
San Diego have done a really nice job out there. They get Micah Quick, receiver out of Fresno.
Mm-hmm.
That Central East program has produced player after player after player.
Yep.
Like he could come in and play early, perhaps. Justin Sanson, I really don't see that happening. And then Devontae Bond, who's a junior college linebacker, has immediate athleticism and size, 6'2", 2 1/4, maybe 230. A kid who was at one time committed to Miami. Oklahoma ended up getting him, and I think he could come in and add some real good depth to that defense.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to stop you right there because we have Westcott Everts from not just Burnt Orange Nation, but also from SB Nation Recruiting. Does a fantastic job covering the Midlands area, all that goes on there, because that is an area where everybody is a very fertile area. Everybody wants to get in on that. Westcott, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dan. Good to be on. Just crazy long National Signing Day like always. No real news there, I guess.
What are the names, what are the stories that you feel like have defined the Big 12's day, the Big 12's National Signing Day?
Well, I'm not sure. I heard you guys were talking about the Oklahoma class, but I think one of the places that you have to start is the crazy day that Oklahoma had today.
Yep.
They weren't able to flip DeAndre Clark, something that a lot of Oklahoma fans, I think, thought was going to happen today after LSU ended up taking Sione Atoyahema, the defensive end from Keller here in Texas.
Right.
But they did pick up Orlando Brown. They picked up Micah Quick. They picked up somebody else. Who else did they pick up today? If you guys can help me out. It's been a crazy day for them. They were able to finish out this class pretty strong and pick up some pieces that Kenyon Friesen was the other guy
Right.
that they picked up today.
The offensive tackle,
Four-star offensive tackle by 24/7 Sports. So their class got a lot better today. They jumped past Texas. And then getting to Texas, the other big storyline, the Longhorns were able to land the only 2 defensive tackles that they have in their class. One of them, a 4-star, Puna Ford from South Carolina. Who,
Yep.
if you watch this film, you won't see very many guys who are 285 pounds and then play fullback in high school and who can move like he does. So he's a pretty rare prospect, only about 6 foot tall, maybe a little bit under, but has some pretty incredible athleticism for the way that he's built.
One of the things that stood out to both Bud and myself is the lack of top-end talent spread across the conference. You know, Texas, not with a class that really compares, if you just look at the evaluations on paper, to a couple of previous Texas classes. Oklahoma with a very nice class taking over the number 1 spot there. But when you look across the conference at teams, TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, not really when you compare them to other conferences and what kind of talent is around in the area, especially coming out of the state of Texas, it doesn't really compare. Do you see this as, if you agree, a short-term thing that new coaching will help to straighten out, or do you see it as a sign of a bigger problem?
I think in some ways it's definitely a sign of a bigger problem. And I think part of what's really going on is that if you look at the top 10 players in Texas, there's only 4 of them who ended up staying in the Big 12 conference. All those other players besides Solomon Thomas, so 5 of those guys ended up in the SEC.
Right.
So Texas A&M really asserting themselves. And then I think another factor that's going on too is that for whatever reason, I haven't quite gotten my finger on why exactly this is happening other than kind of the appeal of the SEC in Texas. But Oklahoma has gone much more national, relying on a lot of guys from California. And let's see, their highest rated commit out of Texas is Samaje Perine, the running back, and he's ranked number 30. So, Oklahoma used to really battle for a lot of the top recruits in Texas.
Yep.
They haven't been doing that in the last few years. And then, other than Baylor, which has really come up, I think a lot of the programs in the Big 12 just haven't typically been known as recruiting powers. Nebraska used to be. They're not in the conference anymore. Texas A&M obviously used to be and is again, and they're not in the conference. So,
right.
Yeah, I think, the spread offenses will probably help some of these teams maybe turn some lesser regarded talent, into some very productive college players. But I think you guys are definitely right in saying that the Big 12 isn't getting the type of talent that maybe it was a few years ago.
And when you look at a team not like Baylor, but Baylor itself, headlined by offensive skill talent, are there players deeper than just receiver and running back to look at in this Baylor class as guys that can come in and compete right away for a Baylor team, building depth, building success year over year?
That's a tough question. I think a couple of the guys that stand out to me, Chris Sanders, a former Georgia player who got kicked out of got kicked out of Georgia Military College after he got kicked out of Georgia, along with Nick Marshall, who everybody knows as the Auburn QB.
Yep.
Got really good size at 6'1", 185 pounds. Grant Campbell, very much an Eddie Lackey type. Another guy coming out of a California junior college, not rated very highly, barely a 3-star prospect. One of those guys you watch on film and you just see the lack of false steps and the instincts. A guy that doesn't really fall for the play action fakes and stuff like that. But really, Jordan Blake, maybe another big guy who played quarterback in high school, 6'1", is going to play cornerback at Baylor. I think they're going to need somebody to contribute early there. For Kendrick Bonds, another cornerback out of Mesquite, a little bit on the shorter side, about 5'10", but
right.
A guy that you put on the film with him and just makes plays all over the field. But a lot of the guys for Baylor that they took defensively, a lot of them, I don't know if I would necessarily call them reaches, but they're not very highly rated prospects. And, a couple of years ago, I think Baylor fans may have been more disappointed about that. But Patrick Bennett and Brian Norwood have done a pretty good job of really turning around that defense in the last year and a half or so. So I think they'll have more leeway. But, not a lot of really highly rated defensive players for Baylor. They're going to have to find some contributors there that are a little bit under-recruited.
Any other names, any other schools perhaps putting together classes? We mentioned the talent level not on par perhaps with other ones, but that you're intrigued by combinations of players they've been put together, or just players around the Big 12, entering the Big 12 that sent in their faxes today that you do think will impact the league sooner rather than later?
Yeah, well, one of the programs that kind of stands out to me is TCU. Less than a month ago, they didn't even have half of their class in place. So that's going to be a storyline that will be interesting to watch develop for the Horned Frogs. Did they end up reaching for some of these players? When I look at their commitment list, they have a 5'5.5" kid from DeSoto, Desmond White, who played quarterback there, who was picked up by them. And they also have 3 recruits who are rated lower than their 5'5.5" guy. So that kind of makes me wonder, if TCU did reach for some of those guys. They did pick up Varshawn Nixon, the all-purpose back from Lake Travis, who flipped from Texas A&M late. He was a really big pickup for them. They managed to hold on to Emmanuel Porter, a really raw wide receiver out of Dallas Lincoln, but just has really great physical attributes, a ton of upside. They managed to get Ty Barrett back in the class, the offensive tackle Skyline, who had decommitted briefly. And then you look at a guy like Nick Foster, a longtime cornerback commit, who really has a ton of speed that they can use. And then Kenny Alaka, a junior college guy that I really like, a safety who enrolled early. His older brother plays for the Bengals. George Alaka kind of has that big kind of nickel type of build that they like running on the strong side, 6'2", 206 pounds. Really hits hard and played in the 4-2-5 defense. It's pretty much TCU scheme. So if you want to talk about a player who should be able to contribute early for TCU, I like Kenny Alaka to really be able to step in and make an impact. Just one of the best hitters that I've seen come out of junior colleges for cornerback in the last couple, or safety for the last couple classes.
We talked about it with Avi Kunath from the Pac-12 and Pacific Takes, who is your true freshman of the year? And it's not necessarily the guy who's the best player, it's the guy who's the best player with the best opportunity. So who strikes you as having the ability, the size, the makeup, the right fit and system to have an enormous 2014?
Yeah, I think Katie Cannon is a guy who stands out to me. He reminds me a little bit of Mike Davis coming out of Dallas Skyline, ended up going to Texas, and that you watch him on film and the speed doesn't stand out as particularly elite, but they just have that knack for getting open deep. One thing that evaluators like to talk about is guys that can really eat up the cushion of defensive backs quickly. For whatever reason, the defensive backs just don't get into their back pedal very quickly, and then all of a sudden the receiver ends up by them. Baylor's developed a reputation as wide receiver U in recent years, and now they're really starting to land a lot of talented prospects there instead of having to develop them. But with a quarterback like Bryce Petty, already in place who throws a really nice deep ball. I think Katie Cannon is a guy who can step on campus and make a big impact immediately.
Perfect. Well, his name is Westcott Eberts. Anything to add that we haven't touched on with the Big 12?
Well, I would say about the Texas Tech recruiting class, there's some players that I really like in it. Peyton Hendricks, a safety from the Dallas area, Patrick Mahomes, Whitehouse, even a smaller guy like Justin Stockton at running back from Cibolo Steel.
Huge numbers.
Really a lot of positive buzz around Cliff Kingsbury when he first came in, but I think this class just didn't end up having a lot of really highly rated talent. So that's going to be a developing storyline over the next couple of years, whether that buzz can continue and whether it can actually translate into Texas Tech competing with a school like Baylor now, or even schools that they've had to compete with in the past, like Oklahoma State.
Perfect. Well, his name is Westcott Eberts. You, of course, can find all of his work on Burn Orange Nation and SB Nation Recruiting. Follow him on Twitter by all means. Does a fantastic job. One of SB Nation's finest. Westcott, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy all of the digestion of signing day.
Thanks, Westcott.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Perfect. All right. Anything strike you about his points that you wanted to expand upon? I think we touched on the talent level with the Big 12 and it being a little bit disappointed by it, but sort of understandable. It's tough to attract top talent places that aren't succeeding.
Two things. One, I don't think anybody knows Texas better than Westcott. That guy is really on.
No, when he says
a
3-star name is one to watch, it certainly is.
Exactly. And the other thing, who's the guy that he pointed out Oklahoma missed out on? Big time defensive lineman.
Yep.
We see it in the Pac-12. We see it in the Big 12. We see it in the SEC. It's tough to get these guys. They're the rarest commodity in football, other than quarterback, which is more about kind of scouting and sometimes getting lucky. I mean, defensive linemen, you know who they are. You have to go get them. There are just not that many of them.
Right.
And those are the difference makers up front.
You can have quick hands at 6'2", 220, but what does that matter?
Right, exactly. At 320, it matters a whole lot.
Yes.
So, yeah, exactly. It's. I think I was glad he pointed it out because that's just kind of a general theme here.
Right.
Especially in the second hour that we've done.
I also noticed a lot of his, you've got to check out this corner. You've got to check out this safety. You've got to check out this wide receiver. Not check out this outside linebacker. Check out this defensive tackle. Check out this guard.
Spread league, and they play a lot of spread ball in Texas high schools.
And they put their athletes on offense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a big difference maker. It's interesting to watch because I really do think Charlie Strong is going to do a good job at Texas. I think you're right. He's going to raise the talent level there. Obviously, Oklahoma finishing strong. You can't fully count on or out Oklahoma at any given moment because as soon as you feel confident in them, they'll go lose to Texas Tech. And as soon as you feel confident in West Virginia, they go 4-8, 5-7. So it is something to pay attention to. But yeah, it's two leagues going in different directions, I feel like, at this moment. And the Big 12, and I don't know if it's a media thing, as soon as they sort of figure out their media rights and get a sort of an influx of cash in, maybe it's different and you attract a higher level coach and start recruiting better, but it's a tricky situation.
And Westcott brought up a great point. They did lose two really valuable recruiting properties. I mean, Nebraska and A&M had not been having insane success in the last couple years before they left.
Big programs, though.
But A&M is probably was the second best program in Texas when it left, and that means you can stay close to home. Geography matters a whole lot in recruiting.
Yeah.
As an Oregon fan, I think you know that really well. A lot of kids express interest in Oregon early on.
Yes. Because
they love the uniforms, they love the up-tempo style, and all the highlight plays that you get to make. And then they take a plane ride that's...
You want to fly 4 hours to Portland and take 1:20 to Eugene to drive?
Exactly. If you're a speedster from Miami, that's tough sometimes. Other times, kids like it. But geography does matter a whole lot in recruiting. And I think the other point, Nebraska, not a great location, but a ton of tradition, fans that are willing to just go nuts, and then they give their teams the resources, what you might need there in order to get recruits. I don't know that they really can replace that, what they lost there. I mean, there really aren't two obvious programs to step up and take the spots of A&M and Nebraska there.
Something else that we sort of began the show with to come full circle. If parents want their kid getting away from bad influences, what's more away than Lincoln, Nebraska?
Right, exactly.
What is more away than the middle of the flatlands? You know what? I've been to Lincoln, Nebraska, and it's a fun time, and the people are great, and the people are nice. But if you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, you're in Lincoln, Nebraska.
And it's not a trouble fund. Unless you're Lawrence Phillips, you're probably not going to.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is what you can do there. You can play football and you can study and you can sort of hang out with people. There's not a ton of trouble to be had in Lincoln unless you're Lawrence Phillips. Unless you're Lawrence
Phillips mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to get through 3 hours of signing day discussion with no Lawrence Phillips. No dice. If we can we put up the impact players from the Pac-12 and then after the Big 12? I just want to put this hat on. This beautiful, beautiful.
Nice band there on the hat.
You like there? I don't know how that ended up
It's like
there.
customizable.
So if we can take a look at Pac-12 impact players, just because I myself, the Royce Freeman thing, he runs strong.
Yeah.
And that is something. Oregon had Trey Carson a couple of years ago. He transfers to Texas A&M, same high school as Michael James, and he was a bigger back. Royce Freeman offers them that once again, and if they can run inside, they can do something that they couldn't do last season. Christian McCaffrey, bloodlines, strong. Ed McCaffrey,
out of Colorado.
Out of Colorado, wore very little in the way of shoulder pads. Ed McCaffrey, hopefully Christian protects himself. The pick of Tala Maivau, whatever. I think it's more indicative of the offensive line class as a whole, and obviously Damian Mama right beneath him. So I think that impact recruits USC-wise, the offensive line.
Totally.
Have to feel good. Solomon Thomas going to Stanford. You're going to add something?
I'll add Jamadre Cobb. We talked about the defense in the middle for Arizona and how they beefed it up and how important it is to have some bigger guys if you're going to run that 3-3-5. A really thumper at linebacker, a guy that can truly stop the run.
Sure.
We saw Arizona have mixed results against the run this year. Sometimes really good, other times not quite as good. I think he's a guy who can come in and play early. If we had a 6 on that list, it'd probably be Cobb.
Yeah, and something with Arizona, right up the middle, a strong defensive tackle, at least one, maybe 2. I know it's UCLA that has 2 strong middle linebackers, but a strong middle linebacker, a strong safety, and that Jeff Castile 3-3-5. You're not doing too poorly. And in the Big 12, once again, we had that up during Westcott, but let's review it one more time. Joe Mixon, Katie Cannon at Baylor. If you can get deep as a wide receiver at Baylor, things aren't terrible. Joe Mixon, I'm assuming start right away. I don't have the depth chart right in front of me, but certainly competing for.
I mean, he's either going to start or he'll be seriously in the mix.
He's in a rotation. And then West Virginia getting some talent with Drayvon Henry, and then Mark Andrews at receiver from similar area. I don't know if it was the same high school as Kyle Allen, but I believe from Arizona.
Yeah, from Arizona.
So.
And if we could add a 6 here as well, I
Please.
will give it to West Virginia. Dante Thomas Williams. And they run that air raid. He's actually a big back, like 5'11 and a half, 2 1/4. It's a really big dude. I know a couple other big schools kind of kicked the tires on him. They weren't sure if they were going to have room. West Virginia wanted him from the start. I'm very interested to see how they incorporate such a big guy into the air raid spread stuff they do.
Right. Fair enough. All right. That's the Pac-12. That's the Big 12. Earlier today we did the SEC, ACC, Big 10, and Notre Dame, whatever Notre Dame is or will be in the coming seasons as a semi-ACC team. Not a ton of surprises on signing day. I suppose the most memorable thing, once again, is Rashaan Evans flipping Auburn to Alabama. We'll see what happens with Malik McDowell. I don't know if we have any updates or anything in front of you, but it's, the rich get richer. A couple of teams are slowly building towards becoming national powers. Very curious to see what teams like Texas do down the road recruiting with Charlie Strong, what UCLA is able to do with this influx of talent, what USC is able to do with the mix of Sarkisian and the influx of talent, how Oregon sort of keeps going, go Ducks, with their success, Stanford with their coaching attrition, the Big Ten, what can Michigan do with high-level guys added to that defense?
Time to win.
Wisconsin's just going to keep beating up on people with 3-star offensive linemen and just hammering people down. What James Franklin's able to do as a really charismatic, talented coach with restrictions at Penn State.
But reduced restrictions.
Reduced restrictions, absolutely. What Florida's able to do as they move to a new offense. What Florida State is able to do in defending their title with higher expectations and trying to rebuild that dynasty.
And that bullseye on them.
That an absolute bullseye in them. What Miami's able to do now that they've been able to keep Al Golden, keep building the talent. They go to a new era quarterback-wise, whichever direction they go in there. But they're recruiting well, and they have that recruiting base to continually get better. How good the SEC West stays, goes up, goes down with Texas A&M, moving forward with such a big class, with Ole Miss trying to usher last year's class and become a real big-time year-in and year-out contender. What LSU and Alabama are able to do with the richest of the rich in the SEC.
And Auburn now.
And Auburn, absolutely.
The West is just ridiculous. I mean,
and we didn't really talk about Auburn too much this morning.
They did a nice job. Everybody talked about all the momentum that was going to be created from the national title.
Right.
And this is kind of bonus coverage, I guess, here.
Bonus
round. They actually had a lot of kids that were committed throughout.
Yeah.
And they have some very good recruiters on that staff. Obviously, Damian Craig is an excellent recruiter on that staff. He got Jameis Winston, Florida State out of Birmingham.
Yeah.
That helped. I think you're going to see more and more good recruiting by Auburn next year because that's really, when we look at it, when we look at the class that Auburn signed.
They started recruiting them last year.
Correct. A lot of these really good players on Auburn's team this year were signed in 2011, which was the year
coming
after
off of the national championship.
Correct.
Right.
I think we see that a lot, and Jimbo Fisher talked about that today. Gus Malzahn did as well. So I'm going to see those teams. Does the recruiting go up, or does it stay the same? Or it's probably not going to go down off that type of deal with the momentum they have.
Sure.
But that SEC West, man, that is so tough.
So who in Auburn's class really does stand out to you?
I like Andrew Williams. I like D. Hakeem Williams, who's first of all, a great name.
Fantastic name. Oh, we need to go through our all-name team.
Oh, we do.
That's our closer. But Auburn, otherwise Auburn, so you have...
Rock Thomas, I think, is a perfect back for them. They already have Trey Marshall at quarterback. Rock Thomas is a true home run hitter.
Trey Mason's gone. But
Excuse me, yes.
Same.
Nick Marshall at quarterback, Rock Thomas, he'll play a lot at running back, I truly believe. Guy who's a decent inside runner, real home run threat.
Yes.
In a way that Trey Mason was not. Mason was a great runner with great patience and great instincts.
Yes.
But he wasn't really a threat to hit many home runs. He hit some. Rock Thomas, you're probably not going to catch him from behind. Really special runner right there. I like him a whole lot. He did a good job on the offensive line, landing Braden Smith, the guy who reps like 5'15", 3 times on the bench. Hit it up on YouTube. It's a class with good balance that met a lot of needs, and I think that Auburn had some holes it needed to fill, and I think he did a good job of that.
Fantastic. Fantastic, as always. All-name team. This is your all-name team.
No, this is actually a Patrick Vence all-name team.
This is Patrick Vence all-name team.
He did
a little bit of Andy Staples.
Yep. This was from, I think, last February, like right after signing day, he put it out.
Right.
And so I pulled the kids who are like who actually ended up being something and got major D1 offers. There were some better names who signed with like FB or FCS and like D2 schools, but these are our main kids.
Yeah, there was a Ty Hildenbrandt of the fabled Solid Verbal podcast found a what was the name? It was Richard Doctor.
Oh, nice.
So then you can change the name Richard into a hilarious turn of a phrase. I don't know where he ended. I don't know if he committed anywhere. All right. It all starts with Raekwon.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest here. Raekwon McMillan, Ohio State. Sony Michel, actually really good. Not just a name.
5-star.
A 5-star
We're talking
running
about 5
back
stars here.
Going to Georgia. Freedom, you have the last name for me memorized?
Oh, gosh, no.
Freedom Akinmoladin?
I'm glad you took that.
Akinmoladin. Sure, why not? Tennessee Sue.
Oh, yeah.
Boise State, I believe. His first name is Tennessee, going to Boise State. So a true Justin Wilcox product. Troy Bacon, also going to Boise State.
Boise is loading up on the all-name team.
Salted Meats, Boise State. I like it. Squally Canada, going to Washington State. I don't know how you end up with Squally.
I think he was going to Boise State initially, by the way. That could have been
really
great. Yeah, initially I thought he was going to go to Boise State.
Boise State may not win a ton of games. Brian Harsin wins a ton of name games.
Yes,
I suppose. Hercules Mata'afa. Mata'afa, also Washington State. So it's almost like an inter-Washington-Boise State rivalry.
It's like a
here.
Northwestern and Deep South phenomenon.
Do you know how many tweets we're going to get, by the way? Like, how could you not mention blank, blank?
Several.
We're going to get several. Multiple dozens.
11.
11. You have Cannon Smith going to Clemson. Speedy Noyle, who is, in fact, Speedy.
For a receiver name, it's hard to beat Speedy Noyle.
I do like it, though, when people have nicknames that aren't descriptive of what they are. Like when a giant defensive tackle is like Tiny Moala. Yeah. Tiny Moala going to Cal. It was Villamani, but who wants to say that?
Right.
You want to say Tiny when the man is 365 pounds. You have DeMarcus Christmas.
Yep.
And Travante Valentine.
Both really big defensive tackles from about 200 miles apart. Both like 4/5-star types. Both from Florida. One going to LSU, one going to Florida State.
So you're saying they need to double date?
I'm saying that, yeah, exactly. Like you had the holiday tackles, essentially.
Sure, the holiday tackles. You have Naquez Pringle.
Is it Naquez or Naquez? I was thinking you may pronounce it with a K.
You know what?
I'm not sure, but that's kind of a cool name.
We're winners when we're hanging out with Naquez.
Also
a
defensive tackle.
Taiwan Deal.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Pretty cool name.
Duranya. Hit me with the pronunciation.
I think it's Duranye.
Duranye Matthews. Does he end up somewhere?
Out of South Fort Myers High School. Let's see where he signed.
Let's see where he goes. And you have Buddha, though I think I heard Avi say Buddha. Which I think works just as well. Buddha or Buddha Baker.
Buddha Baker's kind of new. Like he's kind of doing his own path, not really the same as Buddha.
Right. So did Duranye end up anywhere?
It's Duranye Matthews, isn't it?
Yes.
Am I misspelling
That's
that
what I
as
have
poorly
down
as
here.
Oh, that's the one with the crazy like J and stuff in there.
Yeah, that's why I was pronouncing it incorrectly.
It's like Derange, yeah.
Okay. People are waiting.
Okay, here we go. Got my
What do we have
Google
here?
skills.
Where did Mr. Matthews
loading.
end up?
Looks like he is not signed yet.
Ah!
But
There is a steal out there.
with some interest from Marshall, this may be an FCS type deal.
Right.
Or
That'll
maybe we'll
happen.
see him in a couple years.
That is your all-name
Good
team.
luck to Matthews.
Good luck to him. We discussed Pac-12. We discussed Big 12. I cannot stress enough to every single person watching this, go to SB Nation's recruiting site all year long. Bud and his staff do a fantastic job. The college football site on SB Nation do a terrific job. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thank you to the studio staff here in New York for putting everything together and dealing with outstanding headwear and Mr. Bud Elliott making his new New York studio debut. For more, be sure to follow everybody on Twitter. Enjoy your time. Go outside. Don't take recruiting too seriously. And by all means, have a happy signing day.